Okay, hi guys. We are on to 12.4, simplifying rational expressions. This chapter 12 is really important. You're going to see these things over and over again. So especially when you get into algebra 2, so you really want to remember them. So I'm going to start by reading what's here. A rational expression is an expression that can be written as a ratio of two polynomials. So I've underlined this stuff. So basically it's a fraction. A ratio means a fraction. So there's an example right here. It says where the denominator is not 0. Remember, we did the graphing in 12.1. You saw the inverses and stuff, that there's a gap, there's a hole missing. So you cannot have a 0 in the bottom of a fraction. That's what it means. There's nothing there. Okay? So a rational expression is undefined when the denominator is 0. A number that makes a rational expression undefined is called an excluded value. So oftentimes they're going to ask you what an excluded value is. So for example, we're going to take this basic rational expression 2 over x minus 3, which I wrote here. So they're only interested in the bottom. So what number would make the bottom a 0? So if you can't see it, this is what you can do, because they just assume that you're going to see it. So you take this term and you set it equal to 0 and you solve it. 3. So the excluded value would be 3 if that's what they asked you. And if you plugged it back in, 3 minus 3 would give you 0. So the excluded value that they're looking for is 3. So that's how we're going to start. They want the excluded values for all of these. So I have the piece of paper here. On this, I'm going to go ahead and write it on here. So we're going to start with A here. I'm going to write it right here. X plus 8 divided by 10x. Remember, we're only interested in the bottom. It's the denominator. It has nothing to do with the numerator. So what's the only value that you could plug in for x that would turn this whole bottom thing into a 0? I hope that you realize on something as simple as this, the only answer is 0. X cannot be 0. 10 times 0 would make a 0. Any other number would work. You can put negative, positive. They would all give you a number apart from 0. So when it just has a number in x, think about 0. That's the easiest possible that you could get. Then B, we've got 5 divided by 2y plus 14. You can go ahead and you can do it two ways. You can set the whole thing equal to 0, or you can factor out. Remember, we are only interested in the denominator. So I'm going to take out the 2, and I'm going to be left with y plus 7. Remember, always look at terms and things for the GCF. We did that when we started factoring. Always look and see if something can come out. So hopefully you can look at this and say the opposite of plus 7 would be minus 7. But if not, you go ahead and you set it equal to 0. So the excluded value for B would be negative 7. Here it's going to be 0, okay? So now they're getting to C, where we have 4v divided by, make it v squared minus 9. I'm just going to make it bigger. So going back to factoring, so it's all about remembering how to factor from chapter 10. That's why we did a lot of the factoring. So you have two terms, and hopefully you remember that this is a difference of squares. 9 is a perfect square, and 1v squared is a perfect square of v times v. So this is going to factor to v minus 3 and v plus 3. So just like here, there's an exponent of 1, you have one answer. So here you have an exponent of 2. That means you must probably going to have two solutions, right? Unless it's a double root, but it's not. So v minus 3 equals 0 and v plus 3 equals 0. So v cannot be negative 3 and v cannot be 3. Those are the two excluded values. So I'm not going to go back and show all the little steps again because we're almost at the end. You should understand now what to do with this. Here now we've got 8w squared plus w plus 5. So all I'm interested in is this bottom. So I'm going to move here. This is what we're interested in. So you look and see if you can factor real quick. Only choice here is a 5 and 1. I can have a 4w and a 2w. That's not going to work. I can have an 8w and a 1w. That's not going to work. I can't make a 1. So I know I can't factor. So the one thing that they're saying to check real quick, because you did the discriminant, is see if it is a negative number under a square root. If it is, then we don't have to worry about it, okay? So remember, you test b squared minus 4ac. So you're going to have to use all your skills, all right? So everything that you've learned now, we're at the end of the book, is going to come into play. So b is 1, so 1 squared minus 4 times a is 8 times c is 5. So 1 squared is 1 minus 32 minus 5. It's a big number, so it is definitely going to be a negative number. So it's going to be less than 0. So there are no excluded values. So that's a quick way, is use the discriminant to see if you can't factor, make sure that it's not a negative number. If it's not a negative number, then if you can't factor, you have to use a quadratic. But this section, we're not that advanced yet. It's more about factoring, okay? So A, 0. B, the excluded value is negative 7. C, you had a difference of perfect squares. You had excluded value of negative 3 and 3. Then D, it did not factor. So we just checked by the discriminant to see if it was going to be a positive number to find out what it was, or if it's going to be a negative number under a square root, which it was. 32 times 5 is definitely less than 1, so it is no excluded values. All right. So now we're going to move over and we're going to learn how to simplify rational expressions. And this is something you're going to do in college, so this is a big deal that keeps coming back. So you know how you have regular numbers, so you have something like 5 divided by 5, and that's 1. Okay, you can simplify. It's the same with a rational expression, a polynomial divided by a polynomial. If you find something exactly the same, top and bottom, you can reduce it. So here they had a times c, they just did an example, this is multiplication, over b times c. So the c's were the same, so they canceled, and your answer was just a over b. Okay? Here, they gave you an example of 2x plus 4 divided by 3x plus 6. And this is where you have to remember that about the GCF. I can take a 2 out, so I take it out, and that leaves me x plus 2. Then on the bottom, a 3 will come out of 6, so I divide the 3. You're dividing. That leaves x plus 2. Now you look, numerator and denominator. Is there anything that's exactly the same top and bottom? It is. This term can be simplified, so your answer is 2/3, okay? So this is what you're going to have to be able to do. You are simplifying. And sometimes it's just one thing. Sometimes it's simplifying 8 over 10 and reducing it down to 4/5. Sometimes it's canceling whole terms like here. So we're going to go ahead and start. So A is R divided by 2R. So this is real simple, but I'm going to show you and make a big deal of this that you don't make this mistake. Can you see that you have R's top and bottom? Hopefully you can see that. You can cancel. So now do not write 2 as your answer, because what goes on top? You can't have a 0 on the top of the numerator here, because that doesn't make sense, okay? You didn't say 1 minus 1, that's 0. R divided by R is a 1. Your answer to this is 1/2, so be real careful. You have to put something here when you divide. If there's not a number or not a variable, it means that you have to put a 1. So you have a 1 on top and the 2 is on the bottom. It didn't cancel. So the answer to this, when you simplify, is 1/2. Now we're going to go to B. We've got 5x divided by 5 parentheses x plus 2. So again, I look here. This x cannot cancel with this x, so I'm also going to make a big deal of this, because this x on top in the numerator is by itself. This x is attached to plus 2. It's a whole term. You cannot separate the bottom x from the plus 2. They go together. So none of this stuff can cancel. You can't just cancel like that. That's a mistake that people make if they don't understand. All right? Here, though, the only thing that can cancel is the 5. So the final simplified form is x over x plus 2. All right? This is a term. This is a single x. You can never cancel a single term, single monomial here with a whole term here. They have to be exactly the same, like x plus 2 over x plus 2. That can cancel because they're exactly the same. But this cannot cancel. All right, so we're going to go to C. 6m cubed minus 12m squared. All they're doing is making them a little bit longer. 18m squared, okay? So again, you are looking now to see if anything can cancel. But remember, on top, the numerator, you have a term. So the easiest way to do it is factor out the common factor from the top and then see if anything will cancel. So I'm going to just look at the numerator now. 6 can go into 12, so I can take a 6 out. Then I have 3 m's here and 2 m's here. Obviously, I have to take the m's with the smallest because that means that it's common in both. So I take 6m squared from the top. That leaves me, there's a rules of exponents, so everything's going back to prior learning. 1m here minus 2 on top. When you divide out 6m squared, you're left with an m minus 2 on top, and the bottom, you've got the 18m squared. So this is the easiest way to do it. Now, the m minus 2 is by itself. You can't do anything with that. But can I divide the 6 into 18? Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and that leaves me a 3 on the bottom. Then I have m squared divided by m squared. That completely cancels. So the final answer to C would be m minus 2 divided by this 3. So C, that is your final answer. So you can start to see how things can simplify, okay? So also too, one of the things I'm just going to do it this one time, but then after this I expect you to always do it. Before you start, always look at the bottom here and find the excluded value. So A, you should know that the excluded value is 0, because 0 times 2 is going to be a 0. Here, the excluded value, if you set x plus 2 equal to 0, the excluded value would be x equals negative 2. So I'm just marking off. We went through on the first page, so you should be able to understand this. Here, 18m squared, set that equal to 0. When you go ahead and you solve that, you have an excluded value, again, of just 0, okay? So for this one, the excluded value, here, 7 minus y, I want to find the excluded value, set it equal to 0, subtract 7. Sorry, I'm kind of squishing up. 0 minus 7 is 7. Divide by negative 1, and the excluded value is 7. So here it is, okay, for this last one. Y over 7 minus y, okay? So hopefully you remember the little trick we had, because this is not correct. We need to divide a negative 1 out. So the y on top is correct. Here, if I rewrite it, I say negative y plus 7, okay? So you know from algebra that you don't start with a negative, all right? That's one of the rules. So you have to divide the negative 1 out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then that's going to change the negative y to a positive y. The plus 7 becomes a minus 7. So I'm going to scribble through here because I've simplified it. Okay? So now, does anything simplify? No. So you just have a negative y on top over y minus 7. You can do it like that, or you can look at it and realize that nothing is going to simplify and leave it as is. But I do want you to see it in both forms, because you might see it as a negative y divided by y minus 7, or you'll see it as y over 7 minus y. Both work. So I'm showing you both ways, even though the book didn't. Because you never know when you take a quiz or a test how you're going to see. And sometimes you have to be able to recognize an answer in a different form, but it's still the correct answer. Okay, so you know how to find the excluded values. You look at the original problem, and you always do that first. So from now on, I'm not going to spend time doing the excluded value. I expect you to do that, or I'll just point to the answer as we go through. So we are going to start simplifying. Okay, this. I'm actually going to go ahead and get a piece of paper so I'm not scrunching it up here. So we've got x squared minus 3x minus 10 over x squared plus 6x plus 8. They want you to state the excluded value, so it's asked for that. So you look at the bottom and you factor it. You should recognize that these are going to be factored. X and x, 8 is going to be what, 4 and 2? That's going to give me the 6, and this tells me same signs. This tells me 2 pluses. So I take these and set them equal to 0. Hold on, I want to make sure that you can clearly see this. Okay, so one of the excluded values is negative 4. The other one, x plus 2, hopefully you can see this in your mind, it's the opposite, is negative 2. So the two excluded values are negative 4 and negative 2, okay? So that's what they want first. Then the second thing they want you to do is to simplify. So we've already simplified the bottom. We're going to simplify the top, which means a lot of factoring, okay? So we're back to factoring. So here, this tells me opposite signs. One is plus, one is minus. And what are factors of 10 that can give me a 3? So we should hopefully know it's going to be x and x. It's going to be a 5 and a 2, right? Because 5 and 2 can make a 3, and we need a negative 3. So we know it has to be a negative 5 and a positive 2. And I know on the bottom I've got x plus 4, x plus 2, because I've already done that. So, looking at this now, I factored everything, because you can't just cancel something top and bottom. Unless I had x squared minus 3x minus 10 over x squared minus 3x minus 10, then you could just cancel it. But other than that, they're giving it to you as a quadratic, and they expect you to realize that you can factor these, and that's how you're going to simplify. So now I can see that these are exactly the same. You can put 1s there if you want, okay? 1 times x minus 5 is just x minus 5, and x plus 4 times 1 is x plus 4. So this is my final answer. The excluded values are negative 4 and negative 2. So you've answered what they're looking for. They want the excluded values, and then they want this polynomial simplified, okay? So here we're going to do another one. I'm going to write it down from the book and work it on here. Again, they want you to state the excluded values. Okay, so here I'm writing it out here, and they want you to recognize opposites, okay? So one of the things is when you see it written the wrong way around, 16 minus x squared, all right? So there are different ways to do it. The book does it one way. I'm going to do it another way, okay? The top, they want the excluded value. The top is fine right now, so I'm going to rewrite it like this. Negative x squared plus 16. I'm going to write it the way it should be written. with the highest exponent first. Also, there should be no negative here. So I'm going to divide out the negative here. So moving from here, now we're moving down here, x squared minus 7x plus 12. And here we take the negative 1 out. That leaves me x squared. Instead of plus 16, I've got minus 16. So I'm just doing it step by step now. Okay? Now all I'm going to do, because they want the excluded values, is factor this. Now hopefully you should recognize this as a difference of perfect squares. 16 is a perfect square. Has a minus here, so this is going to factor to x plus 4 and x minus 4. So that's what I'm going to do here. So if I set those two equal to 0, so I'm not going to show every step because I've already done that, and you should know what I'm doing now. Your two excluded values will be, can't be negative 4 or 4. Those are the two excluded values from the bottom here. So now I'm going to go ahead and factor the top, because the first thing is they want the excluded values. Then they want you to simplify. So the bottom's already done. The top is going to be an x and an x. Both signs are going to be the same. Plus means they're the same. And here tells me what they're both going to be. They're both negative signs. So what are factors of 12 that can give me a 7? Hopefully you know it's 4 and 3. Then on the bottom, do not forget that negative, because I took that out. And this is already x plus 4, x minus 4. Okay? So now you're doing the second part of it. You're simplifying. So you should recognize that this is going to simplify. So 1 times x minus 3 is just x minus 3 over x plus 4. And just because it looks better in math, this minus goes off at the side. This is how you're going to see it. So you got the excluded values here. These EC. Excluded values. You found what they were asking. Always answer everything they want. And then they want you to simplify it. So the negative's out here, and it's x minus 3 over x plus 4. Okay, so you should be able to recognize differences of perfect squares. They have two terms. You have a minus in the middle. It doesn't work unless it's a negative. And look for perfect squares. Okay. All right, so let me just do one more for practice. I'm looking here, just looking through. Let's do one more with the opposites, and then you can go ahead and get started. Or I just picked one. Okay, so let's try one more. I'm going to flip this over. And just from examples I give, here's one. Y squared minus 64. Y squared minus 16y. And my advice to you is take down the examples as I'm doing it, okay, because it will help you. And if you have to re-watch it again, go ahead and do that. So the excluded, if they wanted the excluded values, then you want to factor this first, okay? So it's going to be y. Plus tells me same sign. The minus tells me they're both two negative signs. What are factors of 64 that can give me a 16? Hopefully you know 64 is 8 times 8, and 8 and 8 give me 16. So there we go. We have a double root, two of the same thing. So my excluded value is just going to be 8, all right? So if I set, because it's both the same. So that's the only excluded value. So EV for excluded value, that's my shortcut. Now you should be able to look at the top and see, okay, this is a difference of perfect squares, all right? So you want to look back, and hopefully you still got that cheat sheet or get one off the internet about factoring. So the top factors to y plus 8, y minus 8. Remember, one's a plus, one's a minus. Over y minus 8 and y minus 8. So now I look here and I realize that these can cancel, and that gives you a 1. And 1 times anything doesn't change it. So the final answer is y plus 8 divided by y minus 8. You have simplified these two polynomials down to y plus 8 and y minus 8. Okay guys, this is a really important concept what we're doing in chapter 12. You'll see this again and again in algebra 2, in college algebra. So it's really important that you remember how to factor. Factoring is key to algebra. It never goes away. So just get really strong at it and get really good at it. Okay guys, you have a good day. Bye-bye.